but he ran as fast as they could toward Pocahontas. And I didn't want to work on Pocahontas because of my love of Jungle Book, but I really want to do something with animals. And here's my chance.
One of the first and I think most important ideas that we came up with at the time we were restructuring the story was to have the ghost of Mufasa come back to Simba and tell him that even though he might have died, that he hasn't left him completely.
Simba, you have forgotten who you are, and so have forgotten me.
So now with the new directors in place, the story was starting to come together, and we had this amazing team of storyboard artists who are the guys and girls who board out the movie and sketch it in almost comic strip fashion so you can get a visual idea of what the movie looks like. And one of those people was Chris Sanders, who was assigned the Mufasa's ghost sequence.
I had boarded it once before, speaking of the storyboard process, and I had pitched it. And I remember Roger said, I don't know, I just don't feel it. I don't really get it. I don't understand why this would make Simba go back. And I really struggled.
Well, one thing you find out early is animation isn't a 9-to-5 job. I mean, when Chris was working on Mufasa's ghost, he would stay sometimes till 2 or 3 in the morning trying to figure out what that scene was going to look like.
I was having so much trouble getting down on paper, and I remember it was around 3 in the morning. I got up and I went all the way across the studio, and Brenda was the only person that was there.
See, he lives in you.
And I pitched it to her, and I remember she said she thought it worked, and I was so proud of that. And I couldn't wait for the next day because I know that Roger was going to see it again. And I repitched it, and there it was. I found that little piece of the movie.
I remember seeing storyboards in the hall. It was Chris Sanders' board of Mufasa's ghost. And I was just looking panel after panel after panel, and the words were so powerful. And then I saw it in a screening and what it sounded like with James Earl Jones's voice, and I was completely sold. I said, this is not a B movie anymore. This is a A+.
When you're casting a film, I think the directors really look for voice actors that can give you really unique performances without the benefit of their physical persona there.
Oh dear, I've said too much.
So when you go to someone like James Earl Jones, who does Mufasa in the story,
Look inside yourself, Simba.
his voice is so commanding that when he says anything, when he says, "Can I have a tissue, please?" everyone sits up and takes notice.
That's very good.
Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella. Nathan came in and tried out for Zazu, and Ernie came out to try it for hyenas, and when they saw each other at the session, they went, oh, wait a minute, give us a minute, and they went back out, came back in, and tried out together for the hyenas. And I was there, listening to them do their takes, and I was just laughing so hard, like tears were rolling down my cheeks. But that was for hyenas.
Right, it wasn't until we got it back to California that we finally were looking for Pumbaa and Timon as characters. Finally, we plopped the tape in from the hyena audition and thought, geez, these guys work so well together. Let's use them as Pumbaa and Timon.
They were perfect.
And the shame! Oh, he was ashamed! I tried changing my name once in a name, and I felt downhearted. How did you feel every time that Hey, Pumbaa! Not in front of the kids. Sorry.
This is where animation starts to feel like a 3-ring circus, because at the same time we were recording voices in Los Angeles, Elton and Tim are off in a studio in London writing songs. And I remember one of the first songs they wrote, they called the Cheese Sandwich Song, and it's because Elton wrote it during lunchtime when everybody went out and made cheese sandwiches. And that song became this major anthem in the movie.
A Circle of Life was written on an afternoon up in Oxford Street.
Because that was, for me, that was an extraordinary experience, because I think I rang Elton on the Monday, because we had the session on the Thursday, and said, look, I think I can get the lyric to you by Monday afternoon, give you 3 days. And he said, no, bring it along on Thursday. I was actually lying, I hadn't quite finished the lyric. So I finished the lyric on Thursday morning, and went into the studio and just watched Elton write what I think is one of his best tunes.
Well, 2 things happened around that time. We renamed the movie The Lion King, because King of the Jungle didn't make sense, there was no jungle. And then the score composer, Hans Zimmer, showed up with his toolkit and started to work magic on Elton's songs. And that really became kind of a 1-2 punch for our music team, because on one hand you had Elton and Tim and their great songs and sense of melody. And then we had Hans and his African vocals and percussion. And you put those together and it gave us a truly, truly amazing score.
What he's done with my stuff has been brilliant. It was his idea to put the African feel in Circle of Life. And it's really made a difference to the song and the opening of the movie. It fits in beautifully.
The opening song, Circle of Life, I just went crazy with it. I just went for it, put those choirs on, had my friend Levo do the African chant at the beginning.
Levo was parking cars for some valet service in Los Angeles, believe it or not, and Hans Zimmer had known him from an earlier film they worked on called The Power of One. And Hans asked him to do this opening chant for the movie. So he came into the studio one night, and the guys explained to him what the movie was about.
And we said, well, it's the story about a lion, and all the animals are coming to pay homage to the lion. And so he walked away, and about 15 minutes later said, okay, I think I've got something. And then they stood up at the mic, and they started singing the opening of the movie. And it was electrifying.
So you're working on a movie for a year or two, and you have to realize animated movies come together in kind of a mosaic fashion, bit by bit. And then one day you start to look at the sequences and continuity, and you go, wow, this is getting done, because you'll have a little pencil test, and then there might be some story sketch, and then some final color, and you actually get a sense of how the movie's working.
Oh, goody.
So we took the movie down to Atlanta, where Elton John was living at the time, and we previewed it to a real audience, and Elton snuck in the back of the theater, and we all watched it together. And about halfway through the movie, I realized, we forgot to tell him that we completely changed the love ballad.
Elton had written Can You Feel the Love Tonight as kind of a straight-up Disney love song, and we were all, trying to be different. And so we said, let's have Timon and Pumbaa sing as a kind of send-up.
Oh, can you feel the love tonight? All the signs are there.
When the movie ended and we turned around, and very quietly and with great control, he said, I think you've ruined the movie.
I remember as though it was yesterday. I was driving. I had gotten to San Francisco airport, and as I was going across the Golden Gate Bridge, I had Elton on the phone screaming at me, said to me, you don't know what you're doing. This song is brilliant.
To his credit, I think, and this was really touching, I remember at the time, he said he had always been a Disney fan. On all the Disney movies, he always loved the love songs. This is why he agreed to do it, so that he could have a chance to write an iconic love song for a Disney movie. It was all coming from the right places in him.
And he was right. And it's probably the signature song for, the biggest animated movie in history.
The good thing is that when you're in a creative environment, you're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to experiment, you're allowed to try something, and if it doesn't work, it's no shame on anybody. It's actually the death of creativity is when you don't do that. So, it was okay that we tried and failed.
So we left Atlanta, which was, disastrous. And we flew home, and I remember getting into bed about 2 o'clock in the morning and thinking, I am so glad that is over, because nothing could possibly be worse. And then the room started to shake.
It is nighttime in a shaken Los Angeles basin where a deadly pre-dawn earthquake has given way to major aftershocks, a rising toll in casualties and damage. Tens of thousands of residents are still without electricity, water. Federal, state, and local officials all declared states of emergency.
So there we were within months of finishing this movie, and all of a sudden people can't get to the studio. The freeway bridges were out and the studio's closed. There were gas leaks, and we started to figure out if we're going to get this done, the deadline's not going to move. And so we started shuttling things back and forth. And all of a sudden, this next big film from Walt Disney Pictures, it's being done in garages around Southern California.
When we finally were able to get back into the studio, people were camping out because they had no home. People were without power or water. It was crazy. It was like a tent town.
The last month of the movie was like a whirlwind, and the score was coming in at the same time animation was coming in. There was color, the finishing touches, the sound effects were coming together. And at the same time, Lebo actually went back to South Africa to vote for the first time. Apartheid had fallen, and Nelson Mandela was elected, and it seemed like Africa was in the air. And yet we couldn't help but wonder, does anybody really want to see a movie about a lion cub that gets framed for murder? But it was too late for that. It was showtime.
Roll 'em! It is now 22 minutes before the hour. I'm over 50 years old, and every time Disney comes out with a new animated movie, I rush off to see it. And all this week, we're going to be looking at the magic that has created the new Disney animated feature. It is called The Lion King. And for the last 3 years, the studio has kept its pencils and brushes working hard, making him roar. If you like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin, well, you ain't seen nothing yet.
You start with ideas. It's all about ideas, funny ideas, interesting ideas, emotional ideas. I think that journey of an idea from something that happened over a cold pizza to something that happens out on screens everywhere around the world is truly extraordinary and something that is pretty unique to Disney.
The Evening Star was to go work at Disney and make pictures that sang and moved people and made people laugh. And when you're in it, you're just trying to do the best you can. It's hard. It's really hard. Everyone's working really hard, and you're working long hours, but people are laughing. And I always felt like there was such spirit, and then we wound up making these movies, which are just so beautiful. It was such a rich experience, a rich time. I love all those people. It's an amazing kinship, I think, we all have.
Everyone was so kind, and everybody was so alive. And you'd go into work, and you met these personalities, and you got to spend time with them. You didn't mind being at work. It really was a family.
I love it here.
And that family was making something so amazing, and they protected this thing, and they nurtured it, and it was what it was because of the people that worked on it.
It was so playful.
The circle of life.
I had no idea that you could have that much fun, and it would be called work. Coming to work was never work.
Whenever I sat in the theater and that Disney logo would come up, I remember how proud I was of the thing I had been a part of.
I just feel so lucky. I'm the luckiest guy on earth. I can't believe it. Wouldn't trade it for anything. It's magic.
450,000 boxes of donuts in the making of this movie. Only 3 napkins, however, were used, which is a little bit of a commentary on animators.